Pope Francis will travel to South Sudan alongside other prominent Christian leaders in a long-awaited visit from February 3rd to 5th. South Sudan is the world's youngest country. Since its beginning in 2011, the country has experienced nearly constant violence due to political and ethnic conflicts, resulting in massive humanitarian crises for the South Sudanese people. In April 2019, at a retreat hosted by Pope Francis along with Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the former moderator of the Church of Scotland, the Pope got down on his knees, knelt before South Sudanese government leaders and kissed their feet, literally begging them to build a lasting peace among themselves. With this shocking but humbling gesture, the Pope showed his profound concern to achieve a permanent peace in South Sudan, a peace that would allow the country to build a more stable future. I'm Ricardo da Silva, Associate Editor at American Media. In this video, we take a look at the conflict in South Sudan and how we got here, why Pope Francis has insisted on going to South Sudan in person, together with other major Christian leaders, and what Francis and the people of South Sudan are hoping will emerge from this visit. The conflict in South Sudan has a long, complex, and disturbing history. Before South Sudan came to exist in 2011, it was part of Sudan, at the time the largest country in Africa. Until 2005, Sudan was embroiled in one of the worst civil wars in history, nearly 40 years of war over a 50-year span. This war was fought between the government in Khartoum in the north, which is predominantly Arab and Muslim, and rebels in the predominantly Christian southern part of the country. One of the key leaders during this time was Dr. John Garang, who was the leader of the Sudan People's Liberation Army from 1983 until 2005. Dr. Garang is known as the father of South Sudan, although he did not actually intend for the separation of North and South. He advocated for what he called a new Sudan, which would be secular and multi-ethnic. In 2005, the two sides reached an agreement to end the fighting and signed what is known as the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in Naivasha, Kenya. As part of that agreement, 6 years later in 2011, the South would vote whether to officially form a separate country. Just after the agreement was signed in 2005, Dr. Garang died in a helicopter crash. With his death, the country lost a leader who had a vision of how to move on from the civil war years. In 2011, the southern part voted to separate from Sudan, and with that, South Sudan became the world's newest nation. Even though decades of colonialism and civil war had left the people of South Sudan with extremely poor living conditions, they were still optimistic about the new country. But in just a few short years, things would start to fall apart again. So before we move on, there are a few key things we need to understand about South Sudan. Here's a map of the country. There are about 64 ethnic groups within the country, and within those ethnic groups, many sub-ethnic groups. Historically, there are tensions between these groups, especially between two, the Dinka and the Nuer. And the tensions between these groups in the south during the civil war with the north, they didn't go away, although some of them were suspended for a time. There's a second thing we need to understand. Historically, there's a culture of violence. Because there aren't strong central systems of governance, people resort to violence to sort their problems.
War was endemic. War was really part of the culture.
That was Dr. Andrea Bartoli. Andrea is a member of the community of San Egidio, and he's been heavily involved with the peace process in South Sudan. In fact, here he is, along with other members of San Egidio, meeting in December with President Kiir.
So what you have is, first of all, a country that encountered a long period of gestation, becoming a country. And then an extraordinary investment in violence as a way to defend the interest of the tribe, the interest of the territory, the interest of the group.
And there's a third thing we need to understand. South Sudan is rich in oil, and so it was expected to survive economically based on its significant oil resources. So substantial are those resources that, according to one report, despite sky-high poverty and underdevelopment rates at its birth, South Sudan qualified as a middle-income country based on its per capita GDP. But the problem is that none of this money is arriving at the South Sudanese people, because since the country's inception in 2011, its leaders have been siphoning off oil money for their own benefit. So the struggle for power is also a struggle for more oil resources. So 3 crucial things we need to understand about South Sudan. There are significant ethnic tensions. There's a reliance on violence to solve problems. And despite a lot of oil money and resources, there's little to no accountability in place to ensure benefit for the people. When South Sudan was created in 2011, Salva Kiir, a member of the Dinka ethnic group, became president, and Riek Machar, a Nuer, became vice president. The hope was to have a government which was representative of the country's diversity. But the tensions arising from ethnic differences, fueled by oil-centered corruption, spawned a vicious cycle. Infighting between Kiir and Machar plunged the country into civil war in 2013. On December 15th of that year, fighting broke out in the streets of Juba, the capital city. Joanne Rachel, a South Sudanese woman who was just a child at the time, remembers that day.
15th of December 2013, we had gunshots, and my mom ran to our room and she said, "You go under the beds, there's something happening." So we were so scared. I mean, I was so little then. It was the first time for me to hear that number of gunshots in my life, and it was so terrifying.
Within days of the war breaking out, more than 1,000 people are believed to have been killed, mostly civilians. There's no official count. The killings were ethnic in nature, Dinka killing Nuer and vice versa. It was complete chaos. Over the next 5 years, war raged with only brief interruptions for peace agreements that were quickly broken, sometimes within hours. The damage to the South Sudanese people was catastrophic. In excess of 4 million South Sudanese people have been internally displaced or are refugees. About 400,000 people are believed to have died in the conflict. But because data is limited and the government has failed to undertake a serious process of counting, we may never know the true number of lives lost. In 2018, Machar and Kiir signed a peace agreement that ended the worst of the fighting and set up a power-sharing system of government. The situation has improved, and many important actors have now signed the agreement. But there are still groups around the country that have not signed, for a variety of reasons. Corruption around oil money is still a problem. Though violence is not as widespread as it was in 2013 and 2016, there is still inter-ethnic and intercommunal violence in remote places of the country. In one tragic example, on August 16, 2021, a group of Catholic sisters was ambushed while on the highway returning to Juba. 2 of the sisters, Sister Mary Daniel Abut and Sister Regina Roba, were shot and killed. In the wake of the attack, President Kiir blamed the violence on groups that have not signed on to the peace agreement. All this brings us back to Pope Francis and the reason for his visit. Although his time in Juba will be very short, we have to place it in 3 larger contexts to understand its significance. First, the Pope's visit is consistent with his mission to foster peace among peoples and nations, and to give voice to the most impoverished and powerless. Second, it builds off the gesture of the Pope meeting with and kissing the leader's feet at the Vatican in 2019. And third, there is a strong ecumenical element. That is, bringing various Christian groups together to work for lasting peace in South Sudan. Let's explore each of these themes. To start, for Francis, peace and caring for the most impoverished are deeply connected. His focus on peace is also a call to remember the impoverished who suffer from war. In addition to the thousands who have died from violence, the war in South Sudan has created a culture of displacement. Its people have been unable to remain in their homes or towns. Among other things, this causes high levels of food insecurity. South Sudan has extremely fertile land for farming and raising livestock, but people are unable to take advantage of this if they are forced to flee or their property is raided.
If you are poor and you are in a situation of conflict, your life is really made miserable by the bombing, by the violence, by the lack of movement, by the lack of food, by the lack of water, by everything, right? Pope Francis is saying we need to invent a future that is different than the present that we have. And the best way to do that is to really take the life of the poor seriously. And peace is what changes the life of the poor more dramatically.
The link between war and poverty is key to understanding the second context. the Pope's gesture at the Vatican in 2019. Along with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the former moderator of the Church of Scotland, the Pope hosted a spiritual retreat for the leaders of South Sudan, a highly unusual event where leaders who were in rival factions of the South Sudanese government came together at the Vatican. Speaking to the leaders, the Pope said, "There will be disagreements among you, but may they take place in the office, while in front of your people you hold hands. In this way, you will be transformed from simple citizens to fathers of the nation." Then, shocking everyone, the Pope got down to his knees and kissed the shoes of the leaders, including Salva Kiir and Riek Machar.
He was trying to show us leaders have to be servants. The servanthood needs to be enhanced. And he's showing the humility of Jesus. And Jesus was a leader, and they are leaders, so they need to be humble and they need to serve the people.
The Pope's in-person visit to the country is a complement to the spiritual retreat. As Joanne told us, the Pope met the leaders, and now he is coming to the people.
So I feel like my faith is going to be strengthened. As a Catholic, I'm Catholic, and at least it will bring some hope to the people, and it will unify the church as we are unified in the body of Christ.
The final context to help us understand the Pope's visit is the ecumenical component, involving the leaders of various Christian communities. There's a strong relationship between the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, actually the retreat at the Vatican was his idea, and the moderator of the Church of Scotland. They're all deeply committed to working together for peace in South Sudan. But really, the relationship between these three leaders just reflects the reality on the ground in South Sudan, where Christian churches are united in pursuing peace. One Jesuit priest we spoke with told us how Catholics and Episcopalians, the two largest Christian denominations in South Sudan, will often attend services or community gatherings at each other's churches. The Christian churches are all united under the umbrella of the South Sudan Council of Churches, which is one of the most prominent voices for peace in the country. Pope Francis and Archbishop Welby have a close relationship, and they are taking up the spirit of South Sudanese Christians by making the visit together. But why does any of this matter? If the Pope has no political power, why host the retreat for leaders and beg for peace? Why visit South Sudan? It's worth noting that the retreat in 2019 did have real practical consequences for the peace process. Following the retreat, the community of San Egidio, a lay Catholic movement which has been accompanying the people of South Sudan, launched the Rome Initiative. This is a process of political dialogue, which seeks to foster a more inclusive peace in the country, bringing together the government of South Sudan and the groups that did not sign the 2018 peace agreement. The Pope's gesture paved the way for this public initiative led by a Catholic group. That said, the focus of the upcoming trip is clearly pastoral. As Joanne said, he is coming to see the people of South Sudan and especially to encourage Christians there. At the same time, there's hope that Pope Francis' presence will continue to strengthen the political processes so badly needed in the country.
Intuitively, I feel the Pope is transmitting to the people of South Sudan is that he's really a friend. He's not only a friend of peace as an ideologue, but he's really a friend of President Kiir making peace, of Vice President Riek Machar making peace, that when they will make peace, the Pope will be with them.
The South Sudanese are a people filled with hope for peace. Today, young people in the country are finding ways to express that hope, including through art and music. The presence of these three prominent Christian leaders promises to be another step on the path of peace and offer continued inspiration for those who have known war and violence for far too long.
For me, peace means having no fear. Having no fear to move out of your house in the night, having no fear that you won't have food tomorrow or you won't have money to take your kids to school. And that would be peace for me in South Sudan.
Before you go, hit the subscribe button to follow our channel. For complete coverage of the Pope's visit to South Sudan, go to americamagazine.org. A special thank you to the community of San Egidio for their collaboration on this project. If you liked the video, the best way to support us is to become a subscriber of America. You can do that at americamagazine.org/subscribe. Thanks for watching.